We're going to invite you into our conversation about rail for Honolulu. It's a big topic. It's probably the biggest political topic for the last 10 years. And once again, this year, it's a very important political issue. And unfortunately, a lot of the topics have not been very well covered by our establishment media. There have been a lot of headlines, there's been a lot of sound bites, but there's so many issues involved with the rail that we'd like to spend some time with you and have a conversation about some of the reasons, some of the main reasons why we're opposed to this rail system and why we feel that it would be a real disaster for Honolulu. It would not solve the traffic problem, and it would spend over $5 billion, which means we'd have no money left over for real solutions for the traffic problem. As a result, with rail, the traffic will get much worse and the solution will never be found. A much better transit solution is an expanded express bus system. This can be easily implemented with a much shorter time frame, and it would cost much less money. Express buses can effectively move large numbers of people at high speed from the suburbs into downtown. The bus system can reach out and efficiently service our existing island-wide community. Well, Cliff Slater has been fighting rail for decades. I'm Dennis Callan. I've also been fighting rail for many decades. The rail is just not appropriate for Honolulu.
That's right. That's absolutely, and that's what Governor Cayetano said recently. It's just anybody that thinks that running a rail line down our waterfront is a benefit is, as he said, nuts. You've got to have a very twisted view of life to find that that is going to be a social benefit for Hawaii.
And can you imagine if they ever build the extension into Waikiki, an elevated train down Kuhio Avenue? That's the official city plan.
Yes.
A huge concrete monstrosity right into the heart of our economic engine, which would just ruin the landscape in Waikiki, and the tourists don't even need it.
The tourists really can't use it because you can't take large suitcases onto the train anyway.
Well, especially in the first phase of the project, which is only going to, if it ever gets built, will terminate at Ala Moana Shopping Center. So what tourist in their right mind would take first of all, walk from the terminal all the way over at the airport to the train station, and then take a train to Ala Moana, and then walk hundreds of yards to a city bus with the suitcases and a family, and ride the bus to some place where they don't know where they're going? It's totally absurd. It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
Now, the biggest argument against it is that people won't use it. And that's found in the city's own numbers.
That's right. It's the city's official forecast is that the percentage of trips currently taken by on our existing bus system is 6%. By putting in the rail line, that they will increase it from 6.0 to 7.4%. It's almost irrelevant and will take very few cars off the road, and it is why, in the city's own words, traffic congestion will be worse in the future than it is today.
Mm-hmm. And that jump from 6% to 7% is typical of what has happened in other systems. In fact, it's fairly optimistic, but this is about what happens when a rail system has been put in other municipalities in the country. And there's never been an elevated rail like this put into a city as small as Honolulu. Because really the urban population of the city is about 600,000, depending on where you draw the lines for the country. Now, my biggest concern is that we just don't have the residential population density to support rail. I'm a big fan of urban metro rail systems. In a big city, cities of 8 million, 5 million, Asian cities with lots of high rises, European cities with tight settlement patterns. In my travels, I've ridden on 50 different metro systems around the world, and they almost always are wonderful and appropriate to their dense cities. We just don't have that density For a metro system, you really need to have a lot of walk-ons. You need people walking to the system. Maybe not everybody. You'll have some transfers, sure, from a bus or from a few park and ride lots. But by and large, for the meat and potatoes, it's people walking to the system.
Right.
That's how metros work.
Yes, and one thing was some real misunderstanding among Honolulu commuters, and that is the idea that rail will replace the buses because sometimes on the bus you have to stand. Is that they just don't understand that we're a full train. It's 80% of the people will be standing, and this is not unusual. If you commute, as I used to commute on the London subway, you are almost guaranteed to be standing. That is the norm, and in fact, in the Tokyo subways, they even employ people to push folks further in, so that they can cram more people into these subway cars.
Now, whereas with an improved bus system, we have a decent bus system now, but it could be so much better. You can have express buses with everybody sitting down. It can be very comfortable. We're talking about a bus system of the future, buses on steroids, buses with the Wi-Fi, buses with comfortable seats, bus where you can bring your coffee on board, you can take a nap, you can read a newspaper, you're sitting down.
Another one of the things that people do not understand is that the Country Express Bus C, because it uses the zipper lane to come into town, takes anywhere from 34 minutes to 50 minutes, depending on what time of day you take it. Now, the train is scheduled to take 51 minutes. And so, if you're taking the Country Express Bus C today, you're getting into town faster than you will do when the rail is running. And don't think that you're going to take the Country C bus instead of the train, because they are going to stop the Country Express Bus C the day that the rail starts rolling.
One of the most astonishing elements of this proposed train is how few people live within walking distance of the train stations. So if the city is counting on people walking to access the system, the people aren't there. The first three stations are out in the middle of empty fields right now, which are proposed for housing developments, which are questionable at best, and even those would be suburban sprawl. That's our basic problem. We have single-family suburban sprawl. This is how people have chosen to live. This is how they prefer living, a house with a yard in a neighborhood. That kind of pattern of about 7 houses to the acre is just not appropriate for heavy rail mass transit. And yet the city claims that 60% of the residents of Oahu live along the rail route, certainly not within walking distance of the stations. So this is just more misleading information that's been coming from the city government.
You should really look at those places where people will often say to you, well, I rode the underground in London. It was wonderful. Or New York, you can get anywhere in New York, or Washington, D.C., or Tokyo, or Hong Kong. Any of those, you should look at the density of residences in each of those places, because all of those are in the core cities, and if you look around them, very, very dense residential pattern, and you need that density to be able to make a success, and you need two-way traffic. We won't have two-way traffic. We will have people coming into town in the morning from the Kapolei area. It might very well come in full in the morning, but then during the rest of the day, the trains will be coming every 6 minutes, and there won't be hardly anybody on them. And then they go out again, empty. And
wasting energy.
Yes, and then in the afternoon they'll be full of course, going out, and empty coming back to town. It's very different from the pattern that you see in London, New York, Paris, Madrid, Tokyo, where in the inner city there is a lot of two-way traffic on the subways. And you'll notice in any of these cities there are no elevated rail lines. They used to have them, they took them down. They are very ugly, and they tend to acquire a lot of grunge on the outside of the stations.
Now, not only do we not have the residential density to feed into the system, we don't have the commercial density of workplace concentration in
That's
our
right.
downtown either.
Yes. In fact, I think the number is that only 10 or 15% of all jobs are in the downtown area, which is very unusual. Most large cities have a greater concentration of jobs in downtown.
Most of our jobs would be in Waikiki, and the system doesn't even go to Waikiki. So this means that the city is assuming that almost all of the riders, 90%, 95% of the riders, will have to get to the train by bus, because there's also very few parking lots. You can't drive your car to this train. This gets very difficult for the user. You're in your house, you have to get to work. So you have to walk to the bus station, wait for the bus picks you up. It takes you on a long ride to the train station. You have to walk to the train, wait for the train, ride the train to the other end, walk to another bus, wait for the bus, ride the bus, walk to your workplace, and do the same thing in reverse going home. It would be a disaster. It just would not work. It doesn't make any sense. Now, we have a decent bus system, and it can be greatly improved, and the bus system is more appropriate to our scattered residential pattern, because we have about 500 bus stops on this island, not the 21 stops in a narrow, rigid line that the rail would provide. We have a very dispersed bus system, and it can be enhanced even more with a series of park and ride lots, and then express buses that would leave from those bus stations. You're going to have a much more efficient and better flowing system, and they can be very successful. We're never going to have 20% of the population riding transit. You know, it's not that big a number. We just need to get maybe 5% more. If we could divert 5% off of the H1 and make improvements to the H1 at the same time, we can solve our traffic problem. There are suggestions for adding a lane here and there on the H1. And this would be a tremendous benefit. It'll cost a lot of money. But these are the kinds of real solutions, because after all, 95% of us are driving our cars. And that's going to continue to be a fact of life, especially with the improvement of automobile efficiencies and telecommuting and other kinds of pressures. It's just many other great solutions are available, but they'll all be precluded if we sink all of our money and all of our attention into rail.
That's true.